So as I sit down to record this podcast, the date is September the 13th, 2025. This weekend has been the Grande Con here in Grande Prairie. And so basically it's the local comic book convention. And I've got to say that for a city the size of Grande Prairie, for them to have a Comic Con like the one that they have here is pretty impressive. Like it is not at all a small deal. I wouldn't call Grande Prairie by any means. Like, it's not like a small town, but it's not like a big city either. And if you've ever been here, like, you kind of understand that. Like, it's definitely got like a lot of amenities. It's got a few of the things that maybe you would kind of expect to see, you know, in kind of like a bigger community. But everything is very accessible. You don't really have to drive too far to get anywhere. You can get almost anywhere in town in about 10 to 15 minutes. Like, very cool place in that regard. And so not by any means like a big bustling metropolis. And for them to be able to have a convention here like the one that they have, like, that's just cool. So the guests that they had this year, they had Denise Crosby, also known as Lieutenant Tasha Yar in Star Trek: The Next Generation. And they had Garrett Wang, also known as Ensign Harry Kim from Star Trek Voyager. The Starfleet's forever ensign. The guy that never got promoted. I actually got to talk to Garrett about that. And just to kind of like give you the short version of it, I guess he let that whole thing just sit and boil for a very long time. Like, he kind of had that question on his mind, like, hey, why aren't I getting a promotion? Why aren't I a lieutenant by now? And I guess they came back to him and they just said, like, he waited for 6 years to ask that question. They just came back to him and said, well, somebody's got to be the ensign. Which is just, that's a miss. And as a matter of fact, every other Star Trek show didn't actually have, with the exception of Lower Decks, obviously, didn't have a character in the main cast that was just an ensign. I mean, yeah, The Next Generation had Wesley Crusher for a bunch of years, but he wasn't really what you would consider like the core main cast. He was an important peripheral character, but he was a peripheral character. So for some reason, Harry Kim, Garrett Wang, the one guy in the entire franchise who gets stuck as an ensign for 7 years. Little weird. But he did tell, actually, like a really cool story about his relationship with Star Trek. And so he was talking about being in college, and the first episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation that he ever watched was that episode called Code of Honor. And so, Denise Crosby's Tasha Yar had a huge part in that episode, and it is widely regarded as one of the worst episodes of the show ever written. And honestly, I don't disagree, at all. So, just to give you kind of like a recount of why this episode is so bad. The episode basically has it that the Enterprise arrives at this planet, and this planet is basically populated by Africans. And not just like Africans, but you imagine like the worst stereotype of Africa. And that is what this planet is like. And so, very early in the episode, Picard, he puts together his away team, and they go and they beam down onto the planet to go meet the leaders of this planet. And when they go meet the leaders of this planet, the first thing that happens is that this guy goes up to give Captain Picard a little gift. And Tasha Yar flips right out, blows it all over proportion. She grabs him, throws him down in this judo throw. And then Picard has to step in and say, I apologize. This is my chief of security, and she thought that I was under some kind of a threat. But this leader, this black space African leader on the ground is staring up at them, and he's like, but she's a woman. Your security chief is a woman. And he just becomes so impressed with the idea that a woman could be in a position of authority that he decides that he absolutely, like, he has to marry her. And so he insists on it. And the entire episode, she's trying to fend him off and being like, I'm not going to marry you. I don't even like you. I don't think anybody who has ever watched this episode of this show has ever liked that character. And, because the stereotype, for numerous reasons, but one of the big ones being that the stereotype is just so off-putting. Like, I would almost go so far as to say, like, it's arguable. Like, I don't like to bandy this around very often, but arguably it's pretty racist. Okay, so with that in mind, the episode leads up to Tasha Yar. She winds up having to fight, like, his there's this woman on the planet who was previously betrothed to marry their king, and so she winds up being forced to fight this woman in like a cage thing, and she wins in the end and tells this guy to piss off, and then they just they take off, and they just leave these people to their own devices, just leave them to do their own thing. So Garrett Wang had the misfortune of experiencing that being the first episode of Star Trek The Next Generation that he ever watched. And so with that in mind, he wasn't all that eager to tune in for another episode. But after a few months, he decides that he'll give it another shot. He sees it's on TV, so he tunes in again. And what episode does he see but Code of Honor? So I don't remember if he said that he sat through it or not. Maybe he sat through it. But anyhow, so far, 2 tries of watching Star Trek The Next Generation, both times Code of Honor. And so he kind of waits a little while after that, and he says, it's like, okay, I'll try again. I'm going to try again. So he tunes in to Star Trek The Next Generation, and guess which episode it is? It's Code of Honor. And so 3 tries, 1 episode. Like, at a certain point, a person's just gotta start taking it as, like, you gotta give up on that at a certain point. And so according to Mr. Wang, that was what he did. He kind of gave up on it. And so a bunch of years down the road, Star Trek The Next Generation is getting late into its run, and they're getting ready to give that show its big send-off, and now they're going to have a show to replace it. They're going to have Star Trek Voyager. And so by this time, Garrett Wang has dropped out of being pre-med at university, and now he's focusing on being an actor. And so he decides that he's going to go and audition for this role for Star Trek Voyager. And so he got the part, and the rest is history. But the way that he kind of concludes this story, and I thought that this was absolutely brilliant, was just that he kind of started to look at the whole thing previously, like this particular episode, which was the worst episode of Star Trek that's ever been made. Maybe so bad that, like, these days, like, I don't know, I don't pay attention to, I don't watch reruns on a regular basis. But I kind of wonder if they even bother to air that episode in reruns anymore. I would kind of have to suspect that maybe that's one that gets skipped over. I'm sure it's still on the DVDs. I'm pretty sure it's on the DVD that I have. But I'm pretty sure, I would imagine maybe it doesn't even make it onto TV anymore. But the worst episode ever. It turned out to be this remarkable blessing for Garrett Wang, because he said that, like, if he had seen almost any other episode of The Next Generation, he would have loved the show. Like, he would have just fallen in love with it. And then maybe when he went to go audition to be Harry Kim, maybe that might have stopped him up. Maybe he would have been a little bit more nervous going into that audition. Maybe he would have wound up blowing the audition just out of nervousness. Because he's He's auditioning to go be a part of something that he loves so much. Maybe this experience of just having caught like that wrong, like just tuning in at the wrong place at the wrong time, repeatedly over that period of time, might actually have been one of the best things that ever could have happened to Garrett Wang. And it just gets you thinking about how some of the things in life that seem like they seem like they're pretty bad, and they seem like they're an inconvenience, but instead they actually sometimes even the smallest things can turn out to be some of the best things that ever happened to. When Kim Coates did his panel later in the day when I went, there was a guy that popped up and started talking about DDP yoga, and asked him what he does for to keep fit. And I'm about the biggest fan of Diamond Dallas Page that there has ever been, but DDP yoga is a cult. I'll just put it to you that way. I love that this guy loves what he's doing. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that I've seen him around in place to place in Grand Prairie. And I think that I have always seen this guy wearing his DDP yoga gear. So, sorry to say it. Dallas, I love you. If you happen to see this, I love you, bro. But DDP yoga is a cult. Anyhow, there was a story that crossed my Facebook feed not too long ago where DDP was talking about this precise thing. Talking about how sometimes the things that you think are the absolute worst thing that could possibly happen to you, and instead they turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. And for Diamond Dallas Page, he said that was actually breaking his back in a professional wrestling ring. You know, he had just gotten up into, you know, the WWF, you know, now the WWE, and you know, he had been there at that point for about like less than a year, and he's finally just gotten on to like a babyface run, and things are just starting to go well for him, and the fans are on his side, and the fans are liking what he's doing. And then he has a match with Hardcore Holly, and he breaks his back. And doctors were telling him, okay, your professional wrestling career is over. You're never going to wrestle again. And so, what did he do? He went off and he started to look for other things that he could do to help himself. And basically, that was how he invented DDP yoga. You know, the worst thing that had ever happened to him turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to him. And not just the best thing that ever happened to him, but the best thing that ever happened to thousands of other people. Because there have been thousands of people who have jumped onto this program and brought themselves back, you know, into good health from some pretty dire circumstances. I very much admire what he's accomplished with it. I mean, DDP yoga is a cult, but I very much admire what he's accomplished with it. And, you know, maybe it might be exaggerating a little bit to say that Garrett Wang having the grieved misfortune of having only ever seen Code of Honor as a Star Trek The Next Generation episode was, you know, the best thing to happen for thousands of people. But, you know, for all of the people, and, you know, including myself, who watched that show and loved that character and loved what Garrett Wang did with that character, it might not have been the best thing that ever happened for us, but it was still turned out to be a pretty good thing that happened for us. Like, isn't it kind of like, it's kind of remarkable, you know, just, you know, even good things can come out of a bad episode of TV.